Good evening. I'm Jim Renacci, Chairman of Ohio's Future Foundation. We are a member-driven nonprofit that offers our members insider access to what is going on in our state legislature, and we give Ohioans a voice and empower them to lead Ohio forward. To join OHFF, please visit our website at www.ohiofuturefoundation.org. Tonight, we have the privilege of hosting this forum on vocational education at the Pioneer Career and Technology Center in Shelby, Ohio. Pioneer is Ohio's fifth largest public vocational school in the state, serving the Richland and Crawford County area. Our guests this evening cover a wide spectrum in vocational education. First, please welcome the Superintendent of Pioneer, Greg Nicoli. Greg is a lifelong resident of Ohio, receiving his master's in administrative education from Ashland University. He has been at Pioneer since 2006. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for visiting us here at Pioneer. We're very proud to have you.
Glad to be here. Next, welcome Tyler Skinnerberry, owner of Epic Limited, a custom business automation solution company specializing in applied technologies for production, construction, industry, and general business. Tyler's continued passion is to expose, encourage, and engage youth and adults to fulfill their needs in industry and find value in their self-worth, and he has done so in and outside of his business. Thank you for joining us, Tyler.
Thank you, Jim.
And finally, please welcome Lisa Woods, Ohio State School Board member from Ohio's 5th District. Lisa has been a vocal activist on school issues and won her seat in the State Board of Education in 2017. Lisa has always been a champion of right over wrong and has been a strong voice for Ohio schools. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks for having me tonight.
So we have it covered tonight: a state school board rep, a VOTEC business owner, and a VOTEC superintendent. Let's get started. We're going to talk tonight about VOTEC education, opportunities for VOTEC, why students go, why some don't go, what are some of the programs that are involved, and we should have a good evening tonight talking about that. As many of you know, one of Ohio Future Foundation's issues is VOTEC education. It's something we believe needs to be prioritized in our state. We need to make sure that our high schools continue to push for VOTEC education starting at a very young age, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, making sure those individuals have the opportunity to see other opportunities other than college. So let's start with you, Greg. Tell us a little bit about Pioneer School and some of the opportunities it offers students here.
Pioneer is made up of 36 vocational programs. As mentioned earlier, we serve all or most of Richland and Crawford counties. We have 14 partner districts. We're very proud that over the last few years, our enrollment has grown from approximately 850 students to nearly 1,200. And so we have a lot of great opportunities for training for our students. And we're very fortunate that here in our part of Ohio, that our partner districts recognize that and offer our students the opportunity to receive that training.
Well, thank you. One of the reasons we came here is because we heard such a great job you're doing here. And I mean that sincerely, not the same everywhere. There are definitely struggles throughout the state. Some schools, I was at a school where the superintendent told me there was only 29 kids out of 1,300 going to VOTEC. That's a serious problem when you have 1,271 kids going to college in college prep classes versus going to VOTEC. So for all the panel here, what are some of the biggest struggles in getting students to enter VOED? Maybe Tyler, we start with you.
Boy, it's a pretty complex issue. There's a number of different things that go into that. You have different perceptions, different stigmas that go into that. But one of the ones that I see personally from working with the students directly, and I'll let the others take it from their perspective as well, but I have kids telling me that it's very hard to make a decision to pursue something, and it's an investment of their time. It's an investment of 2 years of their lives. Many of us look at our junior and senior years in school as being the best time of our life before we go on into adulthood. And you want me to do something that requires responsibility, something that's going to push me outside of my comfort zone, something that may, in a JVS environment, I may have to get on a bus like I had to when I was in school. I had to get on the bus in the morning at 6 o'clock. And then I had to go ride another bus to get to school at 8:20 and didn't get home till 5 o'clock. It might take away sports. It might take away that. But the value from what I received was so much above that. And I like passing that on to other students.
That's good to hear. I always talk about when I was in school, we actually had to pass a VOTEC education class in our high school. We didn't have to get on a bus. We had to pass the class to move on. And that was actually in 8th or 9th grade. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on some of the struggles?
I hear a lot about stigma. I think the kids hear things. I think we've pushed college for too long, and that's really a shame. You know, I personally went to vocational school, and that was back in the 80s, and you know, that to me kind of saved my life. You know, it gave me something that I really enjoyed doing, and I excelled. So kids need to know that, you know, that's a very viable option.
It's interesting when you talk about viable options, it's really financial options too. Whether you go to college, you take out some school debt, or you get a VOTEC or VOED education, and you start right out of high school with no college debt, making sometimes twice as much as you would coming out of college.
That's right. That's right. And they're beating some of their friends that are still paying off their debts and not working where they had planned to.
Greg, any thoughts on that?
Well, as we talk about the college debt issue and granting kids an opportunity for a head start, you know, I would reflect on a couple of the programs that we offer here at Pioneer, which allows students to earn their associate's degree through our local community college, North Central State College, while they're still in high school. So it's a unique and kind of interesting calendar coincidence that students graduate with their associate's degree typically about a month before they earn their high school diploma, because they finish up that associate degree coursework as full-time college students during their last 2 years of high school. And so it's a really great opportunity. We've targeted engineering and business administration as two local needs, and the really great part for our families is that it's free of charge to our students and their families. So we give those students a tremendous jump start on college should they choose to take that path.
That's another great opportunity I know that you have here. Tyler was talking a little bit about that. So, you know, when they're 14, 15, 16, 17, they're not sure what they want to do. You give them the opportunity to see a little bit of VOED, but also earn some college education.
Sure. What we find in our conversations with younger students is that they typically, of course, don't fully understand or fully have a grasp of exactly what they want to do, what exact career they want to pursue. But they do typically understand with some complexity what pathway they want to pursue. And they kind of know what they're interested in and what they're good at. And so we just kind of try to open up doors to students and expose them to the variety of careers that are available in each pathway. As I mentioned earlier, we have 36 programs here. We encompass essentially all the career pathways that the Ohio Department of Education recognizes. And so we have a very broad curriculum that allows students to pursue anything that they would choose to pursue. And then where appropriate, of course, students have an opportunity to earn college credits right along the way.
So I know that there is some misconceptions all the time when it comes to VOED. Love to hear what some of your thoughts on are here. You know, our students are in high school and they think, well, VOED means that I can't go to college, I can't make money, you know, I can't make that big paycheck. They have that, and then of course their parents tell them that this is something they have to do. You got to go to college. Well, we all know you can start in VOED, you can go to college later on in life. But what are some of the misconceptions, Tyler, maybe that you know that we have when it comes to VOED careers?
I think in general, we have a cultural issue of understanding value. We have a hard time looking past the attractiveness or the romance of something. And we often see roles that were viewed as industrious, prosperous, things that created things that built the things around us. Because we don't see others involved with that, you know, this has gone on for generations, you know, starting back in the 40s we always want our kids to have it better than we did. So they weren't exposed to that. They didn't get to understand the value of what you were doing, what you were bringing to a community. And, you know, there's fake concepts of what value is in someone now, or in somebody, or in yourself. And to be able to show kids that there is a way of finding self-worth, the way to be able to obtain goals that are readily available through these types of processes, through these careers. And it's not a permanent career. You may be able to adapt. You may be able to start out here, but end up here later on is a very important part. So being able to get over those hurdles and those misconceptions could really set them on a good path.
So Lisa, Tyler hit on that many times the individuals, number one, they're thinking, you know, I need to be able to have a path and a future of some value. And they're taught sometimes in the high schools that, you know, their only value will be if they go to college. Talk a little bit about VOED and some of the things, some of the value opportunities just by thinking that or putting that as part of their curriculum.
Well, kids have kind of because of social media, all the pressures of society, and so many things have changed since we were kids. I think kids don't have a realistic view of what it's going to take to live a good life and fulfill their lives and make the type of money to pay their bills and so forth. And vocational schools can certainly, put them on that path so much quicker. The world is constantly changing, and no matter what job you take, many employers will always continue to educate their workers because of the technology changes that are coming up. And, so we're living in a world that's constantly changing. And our career centers are doing a great job putting things together and keeping up with the times and updating the technology and the equipment so that the kids can go straight to work. That's outstanding.
Greg, one of the issues I see is kids, they really don't understand what a VOTEC or a VOED education can get them. They go to college, they all graduate with a basic business degree or a basic, liberal arts degree, and they come out, and sometimes they're, especially in Northeast Ohio, they could be making, in the high 20s or low 30s. But tell us a little bit about ranges and some of the opportunities if you come here, and maybe the range of where you can go, the difference between that VOED education and what some of the opportunities would be financially as well.
Sure. One of the big misconceptions is if you go through the career tech pathway is that you're going to go right into work, guaranteed right into work, and it's probably going to be a low paying job. And I can tell you, there's nothing further from the truth. Our students leave here. For those students who enter the workforce directly after high school with the skills that they learn here, oftentimes enter the workforce at $18 to $20 an hour, and it goes up from there. And actually, we just had an in-demand jobs signing day just yesterday, where we signed some of our students to our local apprenticeships through our local unions. They went into our apprenticeship programs, and those students, within 4 years, first off, they'll have some college tuition paid for as a part of their program, and within 4 years, they'll be making upwards of $30 to $35 an hour. Again, with zero college debt. So when you look at the profit that they'll be making from their work, and you subtract what they aren't losing in college debt or losing in college payments, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars ahead in just a few years.
Sure, and $30 to $35 an hour equates out to $60,000 to $70,000 a year, which is a good starting point.
Yeah, I would venture to say most college graduates would jump at a chance to make $60,000 a year, and when they don't have that $30,000 to $40,000 of debt that they have staring at them, that looks like a pretty good deal.
Sure, and there are some unique opportunities in welding and others that the number might even be higher, correct?
Oh, if you're a skilled welder, you can easily make six figures just a few years out of high school, and that's not with. You may want to take some additional training. In our area, regionally here, some of the pipe welding welders make big dollars, and as I said, that's a six-figure income. With a very, very lucrative and a very specific skill set.
I've also heard, I don't know if you teach that here, but underwater welding also is a much higher number as well.
Very much, a very, very large number. We have a graduate who's an underwater welder, travels the world, not just the country, travels the world, lives an exotic lifestyle. To be honest with you, the last I heard, works about 6 months a year because he can afford to work 6 months traveling the world, and then he comes home and kind of spends his money, I think. And that's kind of the lifestyle that he's adapted. And I tell you, it sounds like a great way to go through your younger years.
It's funny. I always talk about a friend of mine who was a plumber, got his plumber certificate, ended up starting his own company, ended up building his own business, ended up selling it. Now he's in Florida with a big house and a big boat. So there's another type of situation where he didn't go to college. He went through the VOED situation. So I think that's important. That's why I wanted to hit on that. It's so important. Lisa, in the state budget, there's some scrutiny toward dropout recovery schools. Can you tell us a little bit about how VOED could help out, the rates as a whole as far as dropouts?
Sure. The last year I have gone out to many of the dropout prevention and recovery schools. And I can't tell you how impressed I am, and especially the ones that have the vocational things right with them. These are kids that are most fragile amongst our school kids. These are kids that have been kicked out of schools. Their parents may have drug problems, just really rough stories of what their life is like. And they find themselves, kind of backed up in a corner. And these dropout recovery schools takes these kids in and they help them get to the point of, getting a degree. And I went to some in Dayton, and like I say, they have maybe some issues with soft skills and this and that, but they get these kids in teams. They teach them how to build a house. They were building houses for veterans in Dayton, and they're putting on roofs, and these small teams are feeling that satisfaction of getting something done and doing something for the community that they actually live in. For veterans, it heals the soul. And it's what these kids need to pull themselves out of, where they find themselves. And meanwhile, they're making connections. They're proving things to themselves and to others that they become more hireable. And it's just a win-win situation. And I think that it's really important that we keep an eye on these dropout recovery schools, make sure that they keep going. They're evolving as we speak now. So we want to find the best practices and find, what does the communities where these schools are, what kind of jobs are waiting for them, and get those opportunities right in the school so that they can, go ahead and start apprenticeships or working their way, not only to that degree, but working immediately or even while they get it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
these are single parents that are trying to support their own little families.
Sure.
Jim, not to interrupt you, but I would suggest that your career centers and your comprehensive high schools are some of your best investments in terms of dropout recovery schools. And I know that the schools designated that have that designation many do a tremendous job. But we find that we of course, we serve a population of students who back at their home schools maybe weren't as successful, maybe had some struggles academically, and they come to us and they just flourish because they're in an environment where their particular skill set, be it working on a car, welding, carpentry, construction trades, maybe it's something as complex as some of our IT programs, but they come here and not only is that skill set appreciated, but it's advanced to the point where, we have customers, our general public will come in to seek some of the services that our programs provide, and our students are just so excited to be able to show what they can do. They've never had an opportunity to demonstrate their skills, whereas a traditionally successful student may have, they may have been able to take that A+ home to mom and dad every night. Some of our students weren't able to do that, but when they can take that A+ home on that car that they rebuilt the engine on, or did a brake job on, or that set of stairs that they just built, there's really no greater satisfaction for an educator than seeing a student be successful. And so many times here, at least it's exactly the description that you just gave. Kids have an opportunity to be successful, and sometimes I have to remind myself and I try to remind my staff that we're not just changing, we're not just helping a student proceed towards graduation or maybe make that first step to college, but we're in many cases changing lives, and it's really a tremendous opportunity that we have. So I would suggest that career centers are a tremendous dropout recovery opportunity for the state.
It's interesting. While you were saying that, I remember a student coming up to me when I was in Congress and saying, Congressman, I just wish my high school would have allowed me to do some things, working with my hands, getting more involved. Instead, they kept pushing me to college, and I really didn't want to do that. And I think that's, it has become a problem. Some of those same students who get pushed into that area, who don't want to go there, they want to work with their hands, they want to have these other opportunities, they end up finding paths toward whether it's opioid abuse and other things. And I found that as well.
Right. That's exactly right. Sometimes, if you feel like you're forced in one direction, it's not a direction that fits, or it's not a direction that you feel you can be successful. A lot of times our youth will self-medicate, and we end up with those types of issues. And so rather than investing our dollars in proactive ventures, we end up trying to treat illnesses that we didn't really have to treat to begin with.
Well, I hope some of our legislators are watching this tonight, because I think the other thing, the next question really comes down to enrollment in VOED. And I had the opportunity to visit a high school, and I still remember the superintendent telling me he had 1,300 students in that school, and only 29 were going to VOED. 1,271 were being trained for college. And I said to him, "Are you telling me that we're doing the right thing?" And really what I learned from talking to him was, yeah, he was doing the right thing for funding, for school funding. He needed to make sure the funding was available. And I understand that as a superintendent, you have to make sure your school funding is appropriate. But at the same time, I think the funding is what's driving people not to allow VOTEC students to, find their path in VOED. So, how can we make Ohio work to increase this? I mean, what are some of the things we can do? I know it's funding, but how can we change this perspective? Hopefully some of our legislators see this and we can change some of the way we fund schools. But any thoughts on how we can do that? Tyler, maybe you can.
The funding is one of those big issues. That one probably wouldn't fall into my lap too well. But what I can say is, by working with the kids directly, by being able to see, I have the ability with my work to be able to participate in things that allow me to get my eyes open from educators, from policymakers, from business owners. Everybody has to take a little bit of the blame here. Everybody has to take a little bit of the responsibility. And one of the things that I hear in meetings that just frustrates me over and over again is the word buy-in. If I hear that word one more time, we need to get people to buy into this. We need to get people to do this. And at the same exact time, I'm looking at an actual presentation from the Ohio Department of Education explaining the framework of career pathways from K through 12 and beyond. I'm looking at things like Success Bound from the state. I'm looking at things like Apprenticeship Ohio. And I'm seeing all these solutions and all these answers and all these programs that already exist and already being done. And the word coming back to me is, I can't get buy-in. If we could get buy-in from the correct people, we could use what's already being done and make a real difference in a hurry.
Lisa, any thoughts from your perspective on the school board?
I find the funding very complicated, and we work more in policy. So again, I don't think it falls in my lap either, and I'm glad, because that is.
Looks like it's coming your way.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you that in many ways, career centers and career technical education throughout the state of Ohio has been treated very generously. But I will also tell you in many ways that there is certainly a push-pull for students, because in Ohio, currently funding follows students to a certain degree. So that does create a push-pull among partner schools, homeschool districts, and the career centers when students opt to take that pathway. Again, I would say we at Pioneer, with the 14 partner school districts that we work with, are probably not a good example of a great need, because we're very fortunate to have wonderful working relationships with our partner school districts and the administration, the guidance counselors, the teachers, et cetera. And so we typically serve a significantly larger portion of our student body, of our available students, maybe than other career centers do. I would encourage all of our educators throughout the state of Ohio that to remember why we got into this business to begin with. It's to help students advance to become productive citizens, not only productive citizens, but successful citizens in a chosen career path. And I think that's what I'm very fortunate to work with our local educators to be able to do that. I think we're very successful, very good at keeping our eye on the prize and to looking at what's a successful outcome for every single student, and realizing that, and I would be the first to say that not every student should come to Pioneer. We're not the best pathway for every single student. Are we the best pathway for a lot of students? Most definitely. And so, I think it's about getting to know individual students and taking education from that big picture, the 15 or 1,600 students that we work with in a typical class, down to that one student and what's best for this particular student, and helping that student identify the correct pathway, and then the most cost-effective way to get to that endpoint And again, sometimes that means coming to Pioneer and sometimes it doesn't. And either way, it's okay. It's not really it really needs to be about what's best for students, what's best for kids, as opposed to what's best for maybe the adults.
Sure. I think we're going to take a question from our Facebook Live audience. Gary asked, who would be a parent's first call in a district regarding increasing the emphasis on vocational ed? Any thoughts on who they should call?
Well, I think, we typically, of course, deal with some smaller rural districts, but I think in most of our districts, that phone call would go to a superintendent to get that person's perspective. And again, in our area, again, smaller school districts, the anywhere from 1,000 student school district up to the 3,000 or 4,000 student school district. In larger school districts, you would likely find an assistant superintendent or district career technical director who might be a strong person to talk to for that information.
We got another question from the audience. Why are school districts not able and willing to offer viable VOTEC programs to their high school students? I know this question probably comes from those districts where you walk into a high school and there is no VOTEC presence at all. Any thoughts on that?
They might be busy with the testing and the state report card.
There of course is that is a major factor in every educator's life, regardless of what grade level you teach and what role you have in a school district. State testing encompasses much of our daily lives. I would also tell you that there are issues related to funding that impact that decision to either offer or not offer vocational training. In many cases, it requires you to add another staff member, depending on the district's financial status. That may or may not be a barrier. In the districts that we work with, again, smaller rural districts typically don't have the financial resources to be able to do that. In terms of the way we solve that problem here, they come to Pioneer, they come to us, and they ask us to employ that teacher for them. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, funding follows the student. So in those instances, a portion of the student funding comes to Pioneer to help pay for that instructor. So it becomes very much a partnership, the way we handle it in our little part of the world.
VOTEC education, though, is not required. It's not a required course in high school anymore, passing a VOTEC education.
That's correct.
And it actually, I think I heard it's an elective, correct? So
Yes.
there are some schools that just don't offer any VOTEC education.
Right. And there are some that choose not to. And again, you run into the decisions that we force students to make, we force children to make sometimes are, I happen to have a daughter who's very musically inclined. And so the decisions that she had to make as a younger student revolved around, does she take orchestra and choir, or does she take orchestra and a more hands-on type of course? And so typically, because we have so many requirements for students to take for progress throughout their middle school years as well as high school years, it limits the elective courses that students can choose to take. And so we force students to make choices, and sometimes it's just not possible to fit everything into a given day.
And for me, I think that I think it's also the terminology. So vocational education is morphing. It's becoming more technology based. So, I think back to some of the students that I've worked with that have been fantastic is because they took a freshman class in CAD. So they were able to come in and apply it to one of these CNC machines like this machine or to something else. And as we advance vocational education, it becomes rebranded and becomes career and technical education rather than vocational education, because even though it's a created in another building, oftentimes when it's not in a comprehensive school, it's aligning to regular high school practices rather than being treated as something completely separate. When you create that alignment, it's two things that are no longer fighting each other. It's a career pathway that's now a 2-lane highway, and you're allowed to pass through there, and you can make those changes back and forth across lanes, and it's a huge improvement.
Can you tell us some of the things you are doing in your in your outside companies?
Outside companies or activities?
Activities.
There's so many of them. We're trying to reach out to a much broader network. My big thing is starting out that manufacturing has been lumped into production and assembly. When we hear manufacturing, that's what we think. Manufacturing, for me, because that's what my business is built around, is so much more. Manufacturing is sales, it's marketing, it's distribution, it's transportation, it's production, it's assembly, it's administration, it's entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of different skills within there. So we're working with youth as young as fourth grade, fifth through eighth grade, taking them out on tours, introducing them to manufacturing as an industry, not as a career path, as a career, but within the careers within it. Working with seventh and eighth graders in the schools actually directly. The schools are bringing them to the college. So we're sharing how college paths can even relate into manufacturing. Working with students with disabilities, that's a huge untapped market right there in terms of a workforce who could work in a number of jobs and showing them cross-label skills. So just because manufacturing might not be the choice for you, you might not like it, especially with people with disabilities, the sound might be too much. But what you learn there, the math skills, can be applied to construction job. It could be applied to hospitality. It could be applied to this. And we're just trying to get out there and show people how a skill that's important matters. Some futurists are saying that almost 70% of the jobs that will exist when your child that's in elementary graduates have not even been created yet. How can you address that? How can you set up a career pathway for that? You can't do it by having exact static results. You have to do that with a dynamic process in which we teach these students how to use skills that they've developed, how to go and get the information that they need, and how to get the outcome that they want. And that's the way that we're doing it with these activities we're doing with these youth and adults as well.
Well, one thing we're learning in Ohio is we're not growing, the state's not growing like it used to, the population's not growing, families are not producing as many children anymore. And one thing we're hearing and seeing is colleges, all the colleges we have in the state are looking to bring as many kids in because they have to fill their classrooms as well. And I think what we're finding is some guidance counselors and advisors specifically pushing students away from VOED toward college because that's the path they took. Let's face it, if you're a guidance counselor, you've probably been through a college 4-year degree and you tell your students this is where you need to go, you need to push that through. And some suggest that this is even done to just boost college admissions. I'm not sure that's the case, but how can we start a more equitable discussion about career paths? And Lisa, maybe you can try this one. You know, again, that's a key. Everybody, we have Pell Grants, we have all this grant money pushing kids toward college. What can we do to make it more equitable so that we get VOED back into the game?
Well, there needs to be some influence from the outside, you know, our parents and basically, you know, our constituents out there. You know, they want our kids to be healthy, happy, working on part of society and doing and just really being successful. But what does success look like? And I think one of the things is redefining what, you know, at the department, what is success? Well, you know, sometimes success isn't that big, high, you know, huge paying job. Sometimes it's really making a good, honest living and raising up a family and just being good citizens. And we take that away, that it's like we don't even lift that up. And that's, you know, that's the cream of the crop of what we have is just the good people here in Ohio and their families.
Sometimes success is just being happy.
That's right. That's right.
Finding a career that makes you happy. You know, I will always say,
A trade.
or whether it's a trade, it doesn't have to be in college. When I was running my businesses, I loved going to work every day. And I know people who are in VOED backgrounds that love their job, whether they're plumbers or contractors. I had a construction company for almost 20 years, and I can tell you that there were so many guys and gals on that construction team that they just love being there every day. So it's, again, sometimes it's not about going to some Google or Facebook or whatever. Sometimes, like you said, it's about finding those opportunities. Any thoughts?
Yeah. Actually, I think one of the keys, and I think you hit on it, Lisa, mentioning that a lot of times, you know, guidance counselors, et cetera, maybe don't have an experience in the quote real world. I mean, I think every job is in the real world, but they don't have that other type of work experience. And so there are a couple initiatives that we have locally here that have been very successful. The first is located in Crawford County. Our Crawford County school districts do what we call wage tours. And WAGE stands for Workforce Awareness for Graduates and Educators. And what we found is that most educators, and you hit the nail right on the head, most educators, the typical pathway is they went from high school to college and back to high school, because that's kind of how you do it. And so what we found is that by getting our educators, our teachers out into our workforce, into manufacturing, into our business, into our financial institutions, into our medical institutions, to see exactly what's there, it better allows them to be able to teach their students how the skills that they're learning in class relate to the real world. In other words, why do I need to know this? It's the answer to that age old question in education. I always look back to my math classes in high school. Why do I need to know this beyond the test on Friday? And so by exposing educators to that, we're able to allow them to bring the answers to those questions back to their students. Then additionally, we take students out and we show them that work environment, and it helps them understand why they need to attain various skills. And so it's really been a very successful program. The other initiative that we have locally, and this encompasses all of the counties and school districts that we work with, is a career advising initiative that we actually started 4 years ago with some as part of a statewide pilot. And that has allowed us to put what we call career coaches into a variety of our high schools. And their goal or their purpose is to allow us to expose students to the various careers that fall within a pathway. Here at Pioneer, I typically like to use this example, and I may be exaggerating with the numbers a little bit, but typically when I go into one of our health career programs, and I'll use a program we call medical technologies. It's typically students who are probably looking at a more advanced medical career, say nursing, maybe a nurse practitioner, those types of careers. When I go into a group of students at the beginning of their junior year, and we typically would have 25 students in a junior class, and first few weeks of school, I stop in and introduce myself and say, hey, how many of you want to be nurses? And invariably, I'll get 22 to 23 hands go up out of that 25. It's a an 88 to 90% response. Everybody wants to be a nurse. And then I'll visit that same group of students at the end of their senior year, so approximately this time of year, and I haven't done it yet for this group of kids, but I will, and ask them the exact same questions. How many of you want to be nurses? And typically that number is reduced drastically, maybe down to as few as maybe 7 or 8. And it's not that those other kids aren't going to go into a health-related field, but what they've done is they've been exposed to all the different options that they have available to them. So we have physical therapists and respiratory therapists and x-ray technicians and phlebotomists, and we still have nurses, and we still have nurse practitioners, and we still have those students that aspire to medical school, to be physicians. But once kids know everything that's available, they make much wiser choices for themselves. And so it's really just a neat. I kind of stumbled on it a number of years back, just accidentally, but I think it really illustrates some of the things that we do best in career technical education in terms of exposing students to all the different options that are available to them.
What's interesting, and again, there are so many options out there, and Tyler, I'm going to come back to you on this one, but we do have a skill gap out there with trades. And I've often said in business, you become successful, and I was in business for almost 3 decades, by filling a need. So if you were selling cars, you got to sell the cars that the people want. If you're, filling nursing home beds, you got to have the nursing home bed needs that people want. Well, when it comes to education, we already have a skills gap. We have jobs out there, but we have pushed, especially over the last few years in the state of Ohio, we've pushed our kids toward college and left all these skills opportunities, unfilled. I've said this all along, the best success should be how we can fill those. So find out what they are. We don't need the state government getting in the way. In fact, in the best ways, if we're able to show our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, 9th graders, their opportunities, what they can pay, what they can make, show them the opportunities for VOED here and other places, we can fill some of these skills gaps and fill these educations. We don't need the state to be saying, well, we're gonna match things up. Businesses will match things up. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a very complex one. Going back to what I said earlier, there are so many great opportunities in this state, whether it be model programs like Pioneer or initiatives already throughout the state. I'm going to go back to that K through 12 framework. Ohio has already identified how to develop career pathways, how to do these things. And what's amazing to me is that it seems like it's stuck up here in the cloud. It's almost like, we talk about the cloud and data. It's all floating in the cloud. And then by time it reaches an administrator, by time it reaches that educator who could use that information, that opportunity is already passed. That student has already gone on. We need to start using the resources that we have. And my personal belief is that by endorsing a career and technical education pathway, a CTE pathway, where we start to align all these things together and we start to bring more people to the table. One of the biggest questions I've had recently from educators when we're looking at things like the framework, I believe it was 274 opportunities would come up for students if a teacher would spend one period a semester bringing in someone from the outside to come and speak and explain how what they're doing. We actually just had this discussion earlier, how what you're teaching relates to a skill. So perfect example is this machine back here. This machine runs on what's called the Cartesian coordinate system. How many kids love to do dot to dot? What if you were to teach them every single machine in this room operates on a dot to dot process? And to actually be able to, we actually could use these machines to do dot to dot processes. What if you were to tell someone who loves English, loves literature, or loves a foreign language to bring in a large international company and say, look, there's a place for you in our company to write materials and manuals. I have a manufacturer who we thought they were needing production jobs, which they do, granted, and these are extremely high-paying jobs in the aeronautics industry. They can't even find students that can enunciate, speak properly, and present themselves on a global scale to be able to talk with their international clients. They need sales and marketers. You start to bring these skills together, and even they have said some of our best sales and marketers are technicians that we've brought up. So that guy who goes from 66,000 to 100,000, or that young woman who maybe makes that 80 or 100,000 is now put into a position now where they're not only making that wage, they're also making a commission on top of it. So that's the number one thing to me is to start using the tools that we have, start getting our business leaders more involved with the schools. I just had an entrepreneur tell me, I don't want to be involved with policy. I don't know why you're doing what you're doing. It would make everybody change everything that they're doing. I go, that's exactly what we need. That's what they're asking for. I think people are yearning for this kind of information, and we're just stuck with this data up here. We need to bring it down and bring it back in, and we can make a real change in a hurry.
It's one of the things we're trying to do at Ohio's Future Foundation is make sure we're getting that information flow going, because too often it doesn't occur. So I appreciate that. We're going to take a question from one of our Facebook viewers. Brenda asks, and this is coming back to you, Greg, what about including adult VOED into the conversation? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about adult VOED.
Yes, we have a very strong program here, and in Richland County, we have a number of providers who provide training to our adult students. And typically, we have two types of students. We have those individuals who come to us for training because they want to advance their current career. They want some additional training. They want to skill up for hopefully for a promotion at work, that type of thing. And we love those kids or those individuals because we want them to advance their careers, because then that opens up those entry-level careers for our high school students. But then we also have those individuals that come to us who are and even in this high employment environment that we're in, who still are unemployed or maybe underemployed, and they come to us to attain some skills to get that ideal job for them. And so we're really proud of the offerings that we have. And I think that's one area that we don't want to forget about as we talk about education in Ohio, because there is that gap between those students who finished high school successfully into the workforce and kind of are on their way, and those students who went on to college and they earn their are on their way on their career course that way, to those individuals who kind of got stuck in the middle somewhere. And so we don't want to forget about those folks and the many opportunities that we have. And we typically try very much to focus on local need. So we meet frequently with our local business partners to make sure that we're meeting the skills that they need, that we have those available to our students. And so we do everything from machining program in this very lab to a welding program. We offer an electrician's program. Those typically are the needs in our region. We also offer some health-related fields. That's a big employer in North Central Ohio here. So kind of the manufacturing health careers are big for us. And again, we try to meet those needs for our high school students, but we also try to make sure that those students who somehow fell through the cracks in that career pathway system earlier in their lives have opportunities to come back and skill up or attain whatever skills it is they need.
How about somebody who's lost their job and can't find a similar job, in the area and wants to change their skill set? Is there opportunities here for them?
Most definitely. We're fortunate that with our current situation that we're able to help students find financial aid through Pell Grants, et cetera, to help afford those training opportunities. And I guess probably our biggest issue, if we were to identify one thing, is in all honesty, is more of a communications piece. How do we get the word out so that folks know all of the opportunities that are available? And so it's really a marketing piece as much as anything. And that's one thing that it's one of the reasons we're here today. Why I was so anxious to be here today. I wanted to maybe let folks know what's available here at Pioneer and all of your career centers throughout the state of Ohio. The Ohio Department of Education website has a wonderful website that'll help you identify your local providers and where you can receive training both on the high school side and on the adult education side.
And to add to what Greg just said, from being around a similar area, is I have people that we talk about these types of things to, very knowledgeable business people. And a guy didn't believe that we were saying what we were saying. He goes, well, what do you mean? How can people not know that there's opportunity in our area? He said, I just talked with kids, 18 to 20 years old. And he goes, all 5 of them said that they were going to leave the area because there was no opportunity here. So we also have a big disconnect between people knowing what opportunities are available in their own communities. And that also goes into how do you know what opportunities are available to get into those positions? And that's something that Pioneer does quite well. But when the actual response was, we have politicians. Why are the politicians on TV saying that there are no jobs in Ohio? Why do they always say we need more jobs, need to bring more jobs, need to bring more jobs? And you're telling me that there are jobs? So it almost creates that barrier, and then it's hard to have that discussion as well.
Sure. Well, part of the biggest problem is we have lost that. We said this earlier. We've lost that ability to train these individuals, but also let them see those opportunities. And now we have a whole slew of jobs that aren't being filled. So, Lisa, what kind of resistance do you see from standard education models, from parents and even students themselves when it comes to VOED?
I don't know. I don't know that resistance. I think people just need to know that the doors are open and that there are these opportunities. They just get caught up in the basic schools. I don't know.
We're going to come back to you, Greg, on Pioneer. What does Pioneer do to ensure career pathways and employment after graduation and during? And I know you touched a little bit on that.
Yeah, to be honest with you, our goal for those students who have it as an individual goal, our goal for those students is to get them employed before they graduate. And we do that for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, we can continue to provide support so that as they enter that workforce, maybe mom or dad isn't available because mom or dad is working also. Our instructors can connect with those employers. And so if there's a skill deficit in some particular area, we can pull that student back in for a few days, ramp up the skill area, and then get them back out there so they're productive members for our business community. The other piece is that obviously it gets students fully engaged in their career pathway earlier in their lives. And so we are very adamant that any student that wants to work, we're going to work as hard as we can to find that job. And quite frankly, I joke, but I'm very serious about the fact that we have a number of our career technical programs, this being one of them, that we're sitting in the precision machining lab here at Pioneer. And this program, if a student comes through here and does what they're supposed to do and demonstrates a willingness to work and a good attendance record and a willingness to get along with their peers, they will have their choice of jobs when they leave here. There's that much demand here. They can choose to work close to home. They can choose to move a few miles away from home. It's just a tremendous opportunity for kiddos. So we're very, very much involved in what we call early job placement, and we've been able to work a a number of different systems so that we can get students out working immediately after their junior year ends. And that is one thing that I'm not sure a lot of companies are aware of. I know we work really hard to educate our local companies that students who complete the first year of a career technical program are exempted from many, I should say, of the minor labor laws that allows them to work in shops like this where they wouldn't be able to until they reach the age of 18. So we can get our kids out working a little bit earlier, gives them a head start on their careers, and gives our employers an opportunity to, if you will, create a little probationary period for them. So it's really a win-win situation. Our employers get to pick the best and brightest, and our students get to hand select their own careers. So it's really a great opportunity for kids.
Do you have a percentage that you can give us on how many get placed?
I can tell you this, that typically 95+% are, and the way we break it down, 95+% of our students, and typically it's in the 97, 98, 99% range annually, that are either full-time employment, full-time college, or some combination of the two. We have a lot of students who obviously work to put themselves through school or are in the military. So, we kind of identify a variety of ways that students can be considered successful after they leave Pioneer and after they graduate from high school. And so we talk about military service, we talk about full-time employment, and we talk about college as all three being equally successful. And we try to celebrate all three of those pathways equally. So as I mentioned, we did a signing day yesterday. Of course, I'm a big sports fan, a big Buckeyes fan, and love the Buckeyes and love the Browns and Baker Mayfield and all that. But I had a chance to
year this year.
Oh, we ought to have a great year. It ought to be a lot of fun. Can't wait for the fall. But we had a signing day yesterday where we celebrated the signing of our students into apprenticeship programs. And I as I spoke to our junior students who are kind of approaching that decision time in a year or so. I wanted to remind them that we celebrate our athletes with fanfare, and there are umpteen websites out there that tell us who the Buckeyes are going to recruit and who signed with Ohio State and everything. And we need to take as much pride in students entering the workforce or entering those apprenticeships or making other positive career choices. And so we had a great day yesterday. It was widely celebrated. We were really excited to be able to do it. But I just am reminded that we need to make sure that we celebrate student successes in a lot of different ways.
How much are you adding? You talked a little bit about this internships. How are the internships fitting in? Because I know that gives them an opportunity to see it, but also gives the employer an opportunity to see the student.
Sure. I will tell you that I prefer, and this is kind of my personal preference and kind of what we've taken as a goal here. We prefer paid employment for our students. I think our students add a great value to the businesses that we work with, and I think that if they're going to add value to the company, they deserve to be compensated for that value. And so while we certainly have students who do unpaid internships, and we try not to do that. Now, of course, there are certain instances where there aren't any ways around barriers. For example, there are licenses and credentials that they can't attain until they're 18 years old or until they've completed our programs. And so obviously for students to have those experiences, they do need to do internships, unpaid internships. I will tell you that we are in the discussions of replicating a model from Van Wert County that would allow students to do short-term internships in a variety of different fields. And so we try to be on the cutting edge as much as possible, and we try to beg, borrow, and steal great ideas. We're not bashful about saying, hey, that's a great idea. We want to do it here too. And so we have some local educators who are really on the forefront of doing those types of things. So it's really for a little rural town, Shelby, Ohio, Richland County, Ohio, Crawford County, Ohio, we have a lot of really neat things going on. And again, that's part of the reason I'm so happy to meet you and to host this event tonight, because we just want to spread the good word, and we want to invite other locations around Ohio to come see what we're doing, and maybe they can take some of those great ideas too. Sure.
Well, look, there's nothing wrong with stealing ideas, especially when they're good ones. And that's why we have 50 states, 50 incubators of education, 50 incubators. We have superintendents, different schools. We should be looking at each other and taking the best. That's how we all get better. I know we're getting almost to a point where we're going to be wrapping up here. So I'm going to just come up with one last question. What types of community outreach projects do you think we can do to build this pipeline and actually get more individuals enrolled in Pioneer or similar schools? And I'll start with you, Tyler.
There's so many different ways. It all goes back into the career pathways. I always say at Epic, we always try to do the same exact thing. It's expose, encourage, and engage. I don't even say educate, because education can happen a number of different ways. If you can educate somebody, and if they aren't engaged, aren't going to get knowledge. I just heard that used to be my great-grandfather's saying back in the day, was just because someone has an education doesn't mean that they have knowledge. And I really took that to heart, and the more I think about that, the more I see that. And having that skill is that knowledge. Just because you took that class doesn't mean you got anything from it. So we need to keep on doing what we're doing, have these discussions, be honest about these discussions, and find ways to do those very 3 steps.
Lisa, any thoughts as we're closing?
I would say probably the social medias, and they keep on changing too, but what are the kids looking at? That's where we need to go. That's who we want to bring in, and that's who we need to attract. So I would say, what are the kids looking at, and let's go there.
Greg,
I'm going to be a lot more. I don't mean to say practical than the other 2 answers, but we need a few dollars to help encourage that we can direct right to career education, and career advising is kind of the local term we have here. I know there are some potential initiatives in the state legislature as they work through budget items and other legislative bills. And we would just strongly encourage a positive response to those, because those few dollars can go a long way towards leveraging current resources that we have and encouraging more and more students to be on the right path. And those types of things solve many of the ills that we have in our local society, from drug epidemic, dropout rates, and just create a really successful, vibrant economy.
Well, very good. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. Hopefully we're getting our legislators to keep an eye on what we're talking about, and maybe change some of the way our educational system works. So look, that wraps up the forum on vocational education. Thank you to Greg, Tyler, and Lisa for all of your input and insight. And special thanks to Pioneer for hosting us this evening. Solving problems in our state will never happen by pushing them off to the next generation. Again, that's why discussions like this are so important, to raise awareness, which in turn will provoke action. Ohio's Future Foundation is committed to lead Ohio's forward through education and action. We hope you will join us, and you can do so by visiting our website, www.ohiofuturefoundation.org. Again, thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. I'm Jim Renacci. Good night.